Welcome to Lead the Way with Anna Gauker. Your guide, Anna Gauker, is on a quest of her own to find effective ways of creating change and inclusion in our communities. You have come to the right place if you believe in truth, justice, and coffee. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, I am Anna Gauker. In this episode, we have the distinct privilege of hearing from Wisconsin Representative Chris Taylor. At the time of our conversation, it was a transition in government in Wisconsin. Now, Governor Tony Evers had just been elected, and you will hear Chris Taylor talk a bit about the tumultuous nature of that transition period and her feelings. Just a disclaimer, there was a bit of technical difficulty that day, so you will notice that the audio quality is a bit different during the interview. We persevered and ended up recording the whole conversation on my cell phone. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. This is so good. Like I was saying before, we are doing this podcast trying to talk to local leaders and learn new ways of approaching big problems. And you are so involved in Wisconsin politics and addressing the challenges that come up when different people try to come to solutions to problems in very different ways. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So just to start off, what brought you to the great state of Wisconsin?
It is a great state. I came here in 1991 to go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard really awesome things about the law school. It had a lot of emphasis on social justice issues and working in the public interest, which is what I was interested in doing. I wanted to be a civil rights attorney, so I thought it was a really good fit. And I had had friends from where I grew up, which was in California, who came to Madison for undergrad. So they highly recommended it. And, I wanted to live in a different part of the country. I had gone to undergraduate on the East Coast. So I had gone from California to Pennsylvania, and I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to live in another part of the state. And I loved it. I really loved Wisconsin. I thought it was had so many progressive traditions and such a incredibly progressive history that I ended up staying. I chose to stay here.
What was your trick for surviving the first winters?
That's
I have to know.
such a good question.
Because I'm in my 30s. I've lived in the Midwest my entire life, and I'm still in shock every year. Every single year.
Well, I'll tell you, if I hadn't been in Philadelphia, where I went to college, the transition would have been a lot harder.
Yeah.
My philosophy then, and it's no longer my philosophy, but then it was, you have to just get the biggest coat you can find. So I got the biggest down coat, the puffiest. You know, then, this is back 1991, so it's 27 years ago. It was a lot of volume with coats. We wore those puffy coats that matched my puffy hair. And so that was my strategy, is just get as much material between me and the elements as I can.
Insulation.
Insulation.
Yeah.
Insulation.
That's key.
And I got the biggest Sorel boots that I still have, actually, that I could find. And they're just they are just huge, huge Sorel boots. It was before all the streamlined stuff with, you know, the thin suede and all the stuff that keeps you really warm, but it doesn't have to be puffy. But I was way into the puff. That's how I survived.
And now, what's your...
Now I'm into the, you know, I've got the streamlined version of outdoor.
Thinking warm thoughts.
Warm thoughts. Warm thoughts. Drinking a lot of coffee.
Exactly.
And running around a lot. I think that is key to the winter, is you have to get out in it and embrace it. And it helps having kids who are so happy about snow. So we live right down the street from the old Brick Garden sledding hill. And it's like everybody in the neighborhood, you got a snowy day, I can see the kids. They just keep walking by the dozens to the sledding hill. So that helps.
Oh my gosh. So you did your undergrad in Philadelphia, came to Madison, Wisconsin for your law degree, and then you started working for Planned Parenthood. What motivated you to get into politics after that?
I had before I went to Planned Parenthood, I actually practiced law for a little bit. So I did about almost 7 years of practicing law, and really loved, you know, fighting for people's rights. I've always loved it. And particularly, I think when I was in college, we saw a lot of women's health facilities being blockaded, being shut down by people who are anti-choice and they want to make abortion illegal. So I was very, very politicized around that issue as a young woman, that I just felt it was really unfair that women were being prevented from accessing the health care that they needed. So Planned Parenthood was always I was always a big fan of Planned Parenthood. I thought, you know, they were delivering really quality, affordable health care to women who really needed it. So there, just by fluke, I ran into a woman who I knew who had worked at Planned Parenthood, and she was their legislative director. So she did a lot of the working on the policies that they wanted and worked a lot in the legislature, and she was leaving. And I happened to run into her, and she said, "Oh, I'm moving on. I think she was going abroad." And I was like, "Wow, I would love your job." And it was really, I was kind of late in the process, but I submitted my application and went through the interview process and got the job, and it was my dream job. It was such a great job. I really loved it.
And how long were you there?
Let's see, I was there almost 8 years. Almost 8 years. Yeah. And I loved every minute, and I loved all the people, and it was hard sometimes because I worked in the legislature, and there was always this assault on Planned Parenthood and on women's bodies, frankly. There's always this effort to take rights away from women, and to really infringe upon basic human rights, in my opinion. Basically, you know, your right to make decisions about your body and the most private decisions that you make. So I was super, super inspired by Planned Parenthood, and I was thrilled to work for them.
And when you ran for the legislature the first time, there was there were a few candidates running in the primary. Am I right? You had several people that you were running against, how did you stay focused on your message, your point of view, and kind of not focus on what other people were saying about you and overshadowing your own strengths?
Such a great question, because that's a big challenge for any candidate, I think, is to not get distracted by what your opponents may be doing or saying. I never thought I would run for office. That's the first thing. And I think that was really critical for me running the race that I wanted to run. Because if I didn't win, I was fine with that, because I liked my life. But I was so motivated to run because of Scott Walker and what he was doing to the state. And I felt, I had just had a baby. I had a 5-month-old baby when I ran, and I had a 4-year-old son. And I was so upset, not just about Act 10, but about what he was doing to public education. There were proposed and then passed the largest cuts to K through 12 public education in the history of the state of Wisconsin. So he was doing that. He went after Planned Parenthood and took away all of their state funding. He suspended phosphorus rules to keep our lakes clean, and I live right by a lake. So it was like, I think we got a really good preview and snapshot about what this governor was going to be about. And he gave it to us almost immediately after he was elected. And I knew I know how to advocate for people, because that's what I did as an attorney. That's what I did at Planned Parenthood. And so I really felt like that was a skill that I had, is I'm really in my core an advocate for people. And I focused on issues that were just really close to my heart, honestly. Women's rights, working people's rights, the right, I think, that every child has to get a quality public education, our right to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Those were so important to me, those principles. I found it very easy to run for office, because I talked about the things that were so, the core of who I was. And so I made a determination pretty early on that I wasn't going to spend time figuring out what were other people doing on Facebook, or what were they doing on social media, or what were they, when you do that, you really get thrown off. And any candidate, and I work with candidates all the time who get very focused on what their opponent is doing. But really what you need to do is have a vision for what you want in the state, and a vision for the people who are, who have the choice on who represents them. And so I try to, appeal to those individuals who, actually, this area was part of my first district. Monona,
yeah.
And McFarland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I may be in your district again in the future. We shall see.
Very possible. Very possible.
What did you expect your job at the legislature to be like, and how has it lived up to your expectations, and how has it been different?
The first thing I did not fully comprehend, but this hit me right after I was elected, is how public your life becomes. And you're really expected to have opinions on all sorts of issues you may have never thought about before. So the night I was elected, the first, this is my first campaign where we had this very competitive primary, I got invited to go on a very early morning newscast. It was like, it had to be like 6 in the morning, something super early. So I had to get up at 4 and get there and blah, blah, blah. And I remember them asking me my opinion about something that was going on. I think it was about, actually, Justice Prosser when he strangled, or allegedly strangled, Justice Bradley. And they asked me if I was going to call on Prosser to resign. And I had just barely been elected. I had no sleep, and I remember I was just floored that, oh my gosh, I have to have an opinion about this. I have to I don't know, I was just elected. I don't, I'm trying to figure out what is, right, trying to stay awake, trying to wake up. So I think I didn't anticipate the public piece of it as fully as I probably should have thought it through. And then I also probably didn't anticipate that you are expected kind of to have answers on all kinds of issues. But I've also, I think, become more comfortable over the years just saying, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'll have to look at it. I don't know. I just don't know every single issue I'm ever asked about. Right. And I think that's okay.
I think that might be the most brave thing in politics today, to say, I don't know. I have to look at this more. Seems like there's fewer and fewer public officials out there who feel that they have the ability to be vulnerable enough in public to say, I just don't know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes what happens with politicians is, and this is super unfortunate, it's probably one of the most unfortunate things, is you have to be a human being first before you're anything else, not some political robot. And I think because I had a career prior to running for office, and I had a whole life prior to running for public office, and I really never anticipated that I would run for public office. Mm-hmm. That I've had, I feel like I will say what I want to say and what I think needs to be said. And so I don't, and maybe this is a flaw of mine, I don't know. I'm not constantly, like I see so much with politicians, making a judgment about what you say, whether it's going to be popular or not popular. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've always had that freedom because I feel like,
you know what your life looks like without being in politics.
Yeah, and I had a great life. Right. I was very happy doing what I was doing.
So worse comes to worse, you can handle it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think I'm not, and I have to say Senator Fred Risser gave me some really good advice. When we've talked over the years, because he's been in public service his whole life, really, about don't ever have to have the job. Always leave yourself flexibility so you don't need this job. You don't need the income, and you don't need whatever else goes along with the job. And I think I have always left myself that flexibility, that there were many other things that I could do in life. And even though I love serving in public office, it's been so much better than I thought it would be because I get to meet all these amazing people like yourself, and I get to talk about issues with them, and I get to listen and figure out with them, how do we solve this problem? So it's been amazing. It's an amazing job, an absolute amazing job, and it's been a real joy to have. But I don't feel like I'm indebted to the job, and that gives me a freedom.
Freedom to be you.
Yeah, to be who I am.
Your constituents. Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through the legislative process a bit and what things we may not see from the outside?
Oh boy, well, we've had certainly a lot of shenanigans lately with these horrible bills that have been rushed through the legislature that really serve to weaken the Governor-elect Tony Evers, and Attorney General-elect Josh Kaul. And I think the public probably saw how fast bills can move when the people in charge, who are Republicans have right now they have obviously a majority in the legislature, they control the governor's office, they control the attorney general's office. So they can act when they want to act very, very quickly in a way that subverts the public's ability to really scrutinize what's going on and to really give feedback to what's going on. I think, unfortunately, I think the things that I see so much in the legislature are just absolute abuses of power by people who don't seem to care about the public, don't seem to care about the voters. It's so perplexing to me. I don't understand why you would go into public office, but I think what I've really seen clearly is that so much of the policies, the controversial policies on the big issues that get through, have so little to do with the people of the state of Wisconsin, and they have so much to do with these billionaires and these big corporations that have such power. And I don't know if people know how much power these special interests have, but they have a lot of power, and they shouldn't have the power. The people should have the power over their government. But I think maybe what people don't see as much on a day-to-day basis is that kind of power being wielded in a way that is really not for the benefit of the people of the state. So that's very alarming. But I see that on a very regular basis. The other thing I see is the amazing engagement of the people of Wisconsin in so many ways in their government. So for this lame duck session, I call it dirty duck or rotten duck session, even though the public barely had any notice that these horrible bills were going to be heard at a hearing in front of the Joint Finance Committee where I serve, over 1,400, I think it was 1,424 people came out to oppose these bills on very short notice. And so I think the will of the people to be heard and to be engaged is alive and well in the state of Wisconsin, and that's a really good thing. So I see the people of this state trying to wrest the power from these special interest groups and trying to, make sure their voices are being heard. And I'm really encouraged by that, and I would encourage everybody in the state to remain active, to remain engaged, because I think they make a big difference. I think the potential for people to really have the government they deserve is there, but we have all kinds of obstacles sometimes to that, like all this money that comes into our elections, gerrymandering. That's done a huge damage to democracy, these legislative districts that are so unfair. And then I would say the other third kind of leg on the stool that's been so damaging is the Republican legislators have completely gutted our campaign finance laws to require disclosure and require that the public gets to know who's spending all this money in our elections. So the Republicans have really gutted all of those accountability measures, and we have to be working every day to repeal those things so that people truly can see and truly are informed and able to, are able to know who's doing what in our government.
Engagement and being involved in the process, that seems like a Wisconsin tradition. And moving up here from Illinois, I definitely saw that. It was happening all around me in protests right as I was moving in to my apartment in Madison, and I really love that piece of Wisconsin, especially in the real belief that your voice matters. I don't remember seeing that a lot in Illinois. It just seemed very much like government was happening and it was going to happen whether you liked it or not, and there was not a very strong, vibrant mentality of being connected, having your voice heard. And in Wisconsin, it just seems like people generally in all parts of the state feel very strongly involved in what's happening with their government. And especially that's true in Madison, but I really think that it's kind of in the water or something.
I think it has been such a important part of our government, and our government really has been set up for the involvement of the public. Now, Scott Walker really tried to roll back a lot of those things, and these Republicans have tried to roll that back because I really feel like they want the power. They think it's about them rather than the people, and that is fundamentally wrong.
They know better.
Absolutely. If you listen to the debate on these lame duck bills, that was the message that came out loud and clear, that the people don't know. They don't know what's right, but we're going to tell them about what is right, despite that the will of the people was very, very clearly expressed in the November 6th election. And they were saying, I think, Scott Walker, you have not, you're not getting another chance. You had your chance, and people are still really struggling. Our roads are falling apart. Our public schools haven't been funded. So, but these legislative Republicans have an arrogance to them that I think ultimately will be their downfall.
What motivates you to go to work?
Gosh, so many things. I think probably the prime motivator is that I know government can be a force of good in people's lives. And so, I'm always looking for ways to improve people's lives. That's really what government is about. Government is about improving people's lives and making sure people have opportunities to succeed. So I really have a strong belief that government of the people is so important, it's so critical in our society. And I know that you can, there are policies that I get to work on that are really going to help people. So the challenge sometimes is getting them passed, but we're still working on a lot of that. But, like the issue, I'll tell you, one of the issues I've been working on the hardest is medical marijuana. We are way behind. Every other state that surrounds us has legalized medical marijuana, and I have met so many people, from veterans to people who have had loved ones die from horrible diseases, from cancer, who want medical marijuana in the state. They want marijuana to be available to people who could really use it when they're fighting a debilitating illness or have a condition that could be helped by it. So that's going to be a real top priority of mine this session going forward, because we just had referendums all over the state to legalize medical marijuana, and they all passed. It didn't matter if they were in Republican districts or Democratic districts. They all passed overwhelmingly. So that is an issue I know that can help people, that will help people and help families who are struggling with a medical condition or some kind of debilitating condition, and they don't want to take prescription drugs. They don't want to get addicted to opioids. We've seen what that addiction can do and the destruction. Well, who's ever overdosed from marijuana? It doesn't happen. So there's a real viable alternative for people, and our government, our legislature has not let the issue go forward. The Republicans in our legislature have stopped it every step of the way, but I'm hopeful now that maybe we will get some bipartisan participation and support in legalizing medical marijuana.
With the referenda that you were mentioning, what do you think the chances are Republicans will shift their thinking on that particular issue?
I think it's hard to ignore the writing on the wall with medical marijuana, but they do it on a whole host of other issues where the will of the people is not heard. But I do think it gives us an impetus to move forward with it because we have all these results of these referendum. So it might help us, I think, get more bipartisan support. I think there's a lot of myths out there about marijuana still. It's very taboo with some people. They still think of it, they're kind of 20, 30 years ago, kind of, oh, it's a bunch of hippies smoking pot kind of thing, and don't quite understand that this is a medicine that could really help somebody. And, it's also being legalized all over the country, and you don't see some of the results that some of the opponents predicted. So I think it's about time for Wisconsin to legalize medical marijuana, and I hope to really push that issue this next session as hard as I can.
When you're not fighting for legislation you believe in, what do you do for fun, or what do you do to forget about work?
Yeah, such a good question. Well, I have 2 kids, ages 8 and 12, so they provide a lot of levity. They are 2 boys and really active and into all kinds of things, so it's fun to just hang out with them and hear what their thoughts are on what's going on in the world, and they're very hilarious. They make me laugh a lot. So definitely spend a lot of time with my family and my husband. And then I love being outdoors. I love going for hikes, and I love getting out, where my cell phone doesn't work, and just walking in silence, walking in nature, spending time in nature. We have so many great spots to do that in Wisconsin. We're so lucky. We need to preserve those places that we have. And then the other thing I do pretty regularly is I'm a big exerciser. I run, I lift weights, and I go into my gym and I put my headphones on and I just veg out completely. So if anyone's seen me in my gym and I'm not saying hello, I'm vegging out. I just really can get away even for an hour and take a break, and it so rejuvenates me. It's really good stuff. I found that to be really helpful.
When you are leaving your career of politics, how do you hope that people remember your legacy?
Wow, that's such a good question. You asked the best questions. I hope people remember me as someone who was there to really help people and really try to improve people's lives. I hope that's what I'm remembered for.
Well, I think you're right on track. I've been watching
thank you.
a lot of coverage about George H.W. Bush and just thinking a lot about careers and how we want to use our time on this earth, and I just feel like people don't think enough about how they're spending each day and how these impressions that we make are created by choices that we make every single day, and those intentions are kind of put out into the world, and I think you are definitely making your mark. So thank you so much for being here. I've loved talking with you, and I really hope we can do a lot more of it.
I do too. Thank you so much for having me. I've so enjoyed it.
Thanks once again to Representative Chris Taylor for giving us her time so that we could learn from her. We at Lead the Way want to hear from a variety of people, leaders, perspectives, and political parties. And I think that Chris Taylor is a great example of what it means to put your energy and passion to use and use your voice for what you believe in. This episode, as always, is brought to you by the time and talent of Buzz Kemper, Tyler Willenbrink. I am Anna Gauker. Until next time.